Hey folks, welcome in. This is Chris with Alpenglow Digital, and in today's video, we are going to take a look at using Power Apps to change the default form view of a SharePoint list. In this example, we have a SharePoint list that defaults to something like this, and we are going to use Power Apps to create this sort of experience, which allows you to kind of reorder the fields the way you want, add an admin section, and color the fields a little bit differently so it breaks it up visually for the user. We're also going to talk about how to quickly bring in dynamically the ID of the SharePoint list item. So if you're collaborating with folks, it's really easy to understand what item you're working on. So without further ado, let's go. Hey folks, welcome into SharePoint. I've got two SharePoint lists here that are at the moment identical. We're not going to touch this top one and use it as a reference later on. And the second one, we are going to learn how to change this default SharePoint form, which allows you to see and edit your data. And we're going to change that into a Power Apps form. So there are a couple ways you can do that. If you come into your list and don't have anything selected, you can go up to the top here and click Integrate. And you can see a whole bunch of options for the Power Platform space. We're going to look at Power Apps, Customize Forms. Alternatively, if you come up to the top right and go to List Settings, there's an option for Form Settings. And here in Form Settings, this will allow you to toggle between kind of that default SharePoint form and your Power Apps form once it's created. So we don't have one yet, so I can't click it yet. But I'm going to click the Customize and Power Apps button, which does the same thing as the Integrate and then Customize Forms option that we saw kind of on the list screen. Once everything loads up, sometimes it does take a second. It's creating kind of a new Power App for you. You will see a view of your form, and it's going to pull in most of your fields. I think if you have a lot of fields in your list, it might not pull all of them in by default. But in this case, our list is not super complicated. And so it did pull in all of our fields, I believe, except for some of the SharePoint created fields like created by or modified by, which is okay. We don't need those at the moment. You'll see it gave you a screen and then a form over here with all of our cards in there. So the first thing that I like to do is, again, if I know that my team is going to do a lot of this work on a desktop or a larger screen, I am going to change the layout of this app, which kind of defaults to kind of the phone sizing. And so if you go up to the top here and go to Settings, you can choose Display. And right now it's in Portrait, and I'm going to change it to Landscape. Click Apply. You're welcome to customize the sizing if you want. I think this, for the most part, has worked just fine for us. I'm going to do this. And so now, when we look at our form, we see one just giant form. Again, our snap to columns is on, and we only have one column set. So we have each field going across the entire screen. Again, what I like to do is change this to 12. And that allows you to snap kind of every 12th. And it just gives you a little bit more flexibility as you are creating forms. So what I want to do here is I have kind of two sets of fields that I want. I want to have kind of a header at the top. I have these sets of fields that were provided by the user. And so that's going to be things like event title and description. And then we also have these admin fields is what I'm going to call them. So like the status, the assignee, and the admin notes. These are not things that are provided by the user. The status column, I have a default value set to pending. Assignee allows me to choose a team member that this is assigned to. And then the admin notes does have a little bit of text in here, but it's just a way kind of for the team to relay notes to one another. And I actually don't want the attachments. This is another SharePoint default field. I'm just going to delete that for now. So let's firstly create a header for this, and then we'll talk about kind of how to break up the different fields into the kind of user provided fields and the admin fields. So let's add firstly a header for the top of each request. I think that makes sense. And then we're going to add kind of a breaker for our admin section. So I'm going to drag the form down a little bit. I'm going to go in and then add a text element. And you might see text label on your side. I do have modern controls and themes enabled. And so if you want to do that, you'll have access to a few more UI widgets. Go up here to Settings, click on Updates, and then toggle on modern controls and themes. Either way, you can accomplish the same thing, whether you're using the modern controls and themes or the older versions. So up here, again, outside of the form, I'm going to do a text label. That gets set up here. I'm going to call that request details. And I'm going to have it be full width. I'm going to add a little bit of padding, maybe 12 on the left, a little bit more, 24, and on the right, 12. And then I'm going to toggle auto height on. Great. I'm going to make it maybe a little bit bigger. Sometimes you do need to re-snap auto height. In this case, it looks like it did it for me. But sometimes if you're adjusting padding, auto height will need to be toggled off and on again. So that looks good. Fill, I'm going to do something a little bit darker. And then I'm going to make sure the font is white. Okay, easy enough. So now I've got my form. I'll drag this up to kind of hug the header. I am going to, really quickly, I'm looking through all these fields to make sure they're in the right order. It does look like it breaks here, and these are the admin fields. That looks good. I am going to stretch out these fields a little bit, trying to anticipate, again, the amount of text provided by the user. And in this case, event title maybe takes up this much space. That's fine. Description, I'm anticipating being pretty lengthy. So I'm going to stretch this out. If you get to the point where you're dragging to the right and you can't anymore, if you start dragging to the left, it will still expand the card and then snap it to its own row. And then you can go in here and adjust it accordingly. So I'm going to make this a little bit taller since I'm anticipating a fair amount of text in the description. So if you drag your card taller, then you can then drag your input field taller. And oftentimes, even though it's specified as a multi-line field in SharePoint, for whatever reason, Power Apps will sometimes default it to single line, which is why you just have a single line in the center of your input. But if you come over here to mode, change that to multi-line, you'll then see all of your text wrap here. I'll make this a little bit smaller. And then, actually, let's do a little bit bigger so we don't have a scroll bar, and then make that a little bit shorter. All right, we've got our 3 fields. Sometimes when you do also snap or change kind of the column width, you will see your fields adjust the order. I'm not sure why this happens. It's been kind of a bug for a long time. So type of event got wrapped down here within our admin fields. So I'm just going to drag us back up here. Maybe before date and time, we'll put it. Okay, so type of event, let's have it take up the equivalent of kind of a third of our total columns. Date and time, same thing. Number of guests, kind of same thing. Okay, so these take up about a third. This looks pretty good up here at the top. And now let's add our admin header. We're going to add our admin header kind of similarly to how we did request details, except that this is going to be part of our form because we want it to act as kind of a visual breaker. So you wouldn't want to add a text label and then kind of center it with like on top of your form, if you will. You do want it to be part of your form so that it flows just like any other field and it's always separating the fields in kind of the right order. Again, trying to anticipate somebody using this on a desktop or a phone. So the way we do that is we're going to add a custom card. So if you have your form selected, go over here to the right to fields. Instead of adding a field, which will show you all of your SharePoint list fields, we're going to click here, add a custom card. It's by default going to put it at the end, so you can see it kind of hiding here. And we want that to be right up here because it's going to span the full width, and then our admin fields are going to be below it. So I'm going to add this card. I'm going to go over here and expand it. And then I'm going to add a text label inside of it. So it's going to be similar to how we set things up for request details. I'm going to change the padding a little bit. That matches. I don't need it quite as big as request details, so maybe a font size 20. Let's have it be like a darker red color. Maybe like this one. And have the text label stretch the whole width as well. Make sure the font is white so that we have a good contrast. I'm going to add an auto height. And so now I can make my card a little bit shorter. Let's do that. Boom. And make sure that's full width. All right. Text label's in there. It's a little bit too light. So maybe I'm going to do like this kind of darker. Okay, that looks good. All right. So now we've got this in here. So instead of text, obviously, we want to change this. Admin details is maybe what we'll call this. All right. Request details. All of the fields provided by the user, and then admin details, which the processing team is going to use. And so I'm going to make this a little bit taller just so the spacing looks a little bit nicer. I'm going to drag that down. Okay, wonderful. So I've got my 3 admin fields. I'm going to stretch these a little bit. Maybe let's do like 1/3, kind of like we have them up here, 1/3. And then I'm anticipating the admin notes, just like description, being pretty lengthy potentially. And so I'm going to add a little bit more. I'm going to give it its own row, essentially. And it's also defaulted to single line is my guess. For mode, it is. Let's change that to multi-line. And then we're going to stretch this down a little bit and expand this. All right, so I don't have a ton of admin notes in there at the moment, but it gives us plenty of space to fill that up if we need to. So we've got our user provided fields and our admin fields. One other thing I like to do sometimes is add a little bit of color to our admin fields, just so this whole section sticks out quite a bit. So if you click on the card, you have the opportunity to come change the color, which in this case is the background color. I think I have like a light gray, if you will, that I'm going to add here. So I'm going to add that to these cards. I'm going to go in here, change this, and so one of the things that I don't like at the moment, I'll make this full width, is that we have this kind of white space. So what I'm going to do is actually drag this whole card to take up all of the space. And then I still want this visually to look like it's just about 1/3 of the screen, the same way this is. So I'm going to change the width of this selector. So I'm going to use this as a reference. When I come here, I look at the width. It's set via a formula at the moment, but it's set to 332 units or pixels. I'm not actually sure what Power Apps uses. And so you can see here's the formula. Parent width minus 60 is what it's using. So I'm going to set this to a static value. Again, if you have a lot of folks using this on different screens, then the formulas are really nice because it ensures that it's sized correctly based on the number of columns it's taking up and the screen size and all that. But I know in this case, my processors might just be using this normal kind of desktop experience. And so now I have it appearing as though it's kind of the same size as this column, although in reality, this card is actually much bigger. And I'm also going to stretch this all the way to the bottom of my form. I want to get it right before the scroll bar shows up. So I'm going to maybe change that to 246, 245. There you go. Okay. Make it full width. Boom. Okay. So now we have even more kind of visual separation with what's requested by the user and what our admins see. Before we save and publish this, there's one other thing that I like to do when I'm creating kind of these admin experiences. And that is if you're using a SharePoint list, it's often nice to be able to easily reference the ID, the SharePoint list ID of a request. This is really helpful when you're speaking with colleagues or maybe an end user and you have just one ID, it's unique to the SharePoint list item. And I like when it's kind of front and center in the form that my processing team is using. So what you can do is, because this is integrated with, is using the SharePoint integration, Power Apps is, you have access to some other fields about this request that a user has selected. And so what I like to do is I'm going to add an ID number to this request details. And so right now the text value is just a string. So I'm going to append something that looks like this. Let's do ID : and then we're gonna have a value there. And so I'm gonna close that. We'll add the value in a second. Actually, pardon me. So this is gonna be a value, which we'll get back to in a second. And then we're gonna close it out. Okay, so it's mad at us now because this is not a real value. So let me close that. And so if you come up here and start typing SharePoint, you will see SharePoint integration. And then if you press dot, you'll see some options. So selected, and then if you press another dot, will allow you to see all of the fields associated with the selected item. And in our case, I want the ID. So you could do selected.id, and you can see that gives us a 1. I'm gonna put a space here, which is great. That works just fine. But right out of the box, you get the selected list item ID just by default. I think this is the simpler way to use this. So again, this is just one big long text string that's being concatenated. Request details, ID, a colon, and then a value that we're passing it, which is the SharePoint list item ID, and then a closing parenthesis. And so this allows you to, this will change, of course, dynamically based on the SharePoint list item selected. It's an easy way to say, hey, I'm working on request ID 1. Here are some questions I have. And the person that goes into the list then can search for ID 1 And it's a very easy way to ensure that you're working on the same item. Okay, so we've got that set up. That looks all good. We're going to save this. And then in order for others to see it, you do need to publish it to SharePoint. So we've saved it. We're going to come up here. When you click publish, it will save automatically. And then you can click publish to SharePoint. Okay, so that is published to SharePoint. And now when we click back to SharePoint and click leave, and when we click our item to view it, we see our Power Apps experience. And then when we come into edit, you can edit it just like you could any other SharePoint form, except we now have it visually appearing the way that we specified in Power Apps. So here, let's take a look at what the previous list looked like. Again, here's kind of our default list that doesn't have Power Apps associated with it. So you will see the out-of-the-box SharePoint view. Again, this works fine for a lot of things. It would be a little bit confusing if you are maybe new to the processing team and you're not sure which of these fields kind of apply to you, what was provided by the user. And so I think our alternative visually is much more helpful, breaks up things nicely. A few other notes. Our teams don't tend to use comments in SharePoint lists. It's a little bit annoying. We kind of capture our notes here in these fields. So if you do want to turn off comments, you can come up to the right, go to list settings, go to advanced settings, and then there should be an option for allowing comments on list items. We're going to click no, and then OK. And if you go back to the list and view it, it gives you a little bit more space. So you no longer have this comments pane that's kind of intruding over here. It just won't show it by default. As we discussed before, if you wanted to change back to the default SharePoint list, you could do that up here in list settings, form settings. And then since we have created something in Power Apps, you will see that it's now defaulted to this. Use the custom form. We could select this. It would go back to SharePoint. My understanding is this will not lose your Power Apps form. So if you were to toggle this, go back to SharePoint, maybe you didn't like it or it was under construction, your Power Apps form was, you could use this for a little bit and then come back and reset this to use your form created in Power Apps. Alrighty, folks, that does it for a quick overview of how to more closely integrate Power Apps into your default SharePoint list views. Using Power Apps does a lot of great things. Firstly, it gives you a bunch of autonomy over the look and feel of your SharePoint list view. This can be great because as a processor, you get to customize this to exactly what you want in the layout you want. You can also add these fields, as we've done, that are just kind of admin fields. And so you hide those from the front end user if you were to create a normal Power App that was meant to intake requests, and then just display them here on kind of your edit or processing view. You can also hook this up eventually to Power Automate, and you could set up a button that maybe emailed the submitter all the details. Maybe when an assignee was selected, Sam in this case, would get an email that says, hey, you have a new request, go check it out. You really open up your world a lot once you've transitioned over to Power Platform. So go out there, have fun, build cool stuff, and we'll see you next time.